Good morning, I'm Lynn and welcome to Ewetopia Farms. And today it's windy, so even though it's going into the high 30 degrees Celsius today, it feels a little bit cooler. Maybe not cooler, but you can breathe. So that's okay, we're at the back of the barn now with our breeding group. So I'll knock down their salt and mineral here. This is Gimli's group. Feels a little cooler in here today. Like I said, Hi, I knocked down your salt and mineral. It's a little cooler in here today because we got a breeze blowing through. And this is a cooler barn because of the shade. And we're gonna, this is where the ewe lambs yesterday were. Ooh. So we're gonna go get our two buddies, Quincy and Hilton. Those ewe lambs have left the pen and we're not going to have anyone in that pen for a little while now. So Quincy and Hilton are very lonely up front and they've been in there long enough that we decided that they can come live in a big pen and see the other sheep. So here they come. Two boys, they're gonna have a bigger pen, get to see the other sheep. Hi boys! Have a little more freedom, feel a little more part of the flock. That's a nice boy. There they are. They gotta like that. That's a huge pen. And they can see through the window over here to the breeding groups. And they can see the guys across the way here. And they can look out the windows to see the fields and stuff. They got a drinker. And they should be a lot happier. See? Ernie's just cleaning out that drinker for them. But these guys have been in quarantine long enough now. They have no sign of illness or any diseases or anything. They look great, so. It's been so hot in that little pen, even though we have it open, it's still a lot hotter than back here. So. You can only do what your space and facilities allow, so now we have space for them. So now we'll get them on our feed schedule. See, they don't know that Arnie walks down the feeder and does that. Oh, but now they're figuring it out. They're following you. You guys are lovely.
Your head's in now.
These are the pregnant girls. We don't bother taking the rams out until we really have to, because again, they're getting more individual care in here than they would out in the big group. So they're healthy here. They're not causing us any grief. The ewes are well bred. So today, since we're not doing too much farm work, I thought I'd talk to you a bit about scoring sheep. And when we talk about scoring sheep, I'm talking about scoring their body condition. So many people who are getting into sheep have cows or have had cows in the past, and they are getting out of cows and getting into sheep instead. And they'll come here to buy sheep and say they know nothing about sheep and what to look for and stuff like that. And I always tell them if they had cows, it's basically the same thing, just a smaller version of it. They both have 4 stomachs. They both, you score their body condition the same way, and you feed them very similar as well. So, with sheep, you really can't judge them when they're in full fleece, because the wool hides an awful lot, and I think I mentioned that before. So if you're ever buying sheep, the best time to buy them is when they've just been shorn. That way you can see any faults in their conformation, but you can also see their body score accurately. So I wanted to talk to you about it in layman's terms, because they talk about all kinds of bone structures and loins and stuff like that. But basically, what you're looking at when you look at body score is you're looking at how much fat and meat you have covering the bones, or how little. So there's a score, and it goes from 1 being basically skeletal in condition, and 5 would be the other end of the scale, where you would be considered obese, and everything in between. Ideally, we like to have our sheep around a condition score of 3, and we try to maintain that year-round, but it's very difficult, because when they are nursing lambs, they will lose condition quite heavily as the lambs get older and suck the milk, so you have to feed your sheep a lot heavier to keep up their condition. And when you want them to wean and produce less milk or no more milk, then you've got to cut them off the feed, and that's when you're going to find your ewes lose weight heavily, and then over the summer you will gradually increase their condition score so that they're ready to breed at a 3 to 3.5. I've heard on different YouTube videos and stuff that they're scoring their sheep differently. So sheep scoring, as is scoring of anything or judging anything, is quite subjective. So what I consider to be fat may not be what someone else considered fat, and vice versa. I prefer to see sheep and animals in general in good condition. So when I see any bit of bone showing, it stresses me out, so I'm going to want to feed them a bit better to get condition on them. But other people think that that's just fine, let them go through the summer when they don't have lambs, save on the feed and what have you, and increase their condition right before breeding, which is called flushing, and we are flushing our sheep in the other barn. But the problem with that theory for me is that then you got to pour the feed to the sheep, and they can get sick when their diet changes, and I just rather they were stable year-round. I don't find that they eat any more food when they're in good condition year-round. In fact, maybe the opposite, because they're not always craving food. And another problem with a sheep that's left too skinny is that when you do put food in front of them, they will eat just about anything, including mold. And most sheep that's in good condition and full is gonna be fussy and eat around any mold patches you have in your hay. But a starving sheep's gonna eat anything, and that's when you start seeing listeriosis and stuff in sheep, because they've eaten bad feed. And maybe it's because it was either mixed up in the TMR so they didn't have a choice, or if it was in hay, they were so hungry that they ate it anyway. So, for scoring, I made up a whole bunch of little numbers that I was gonna stick on the sheep's backs, and we'll see if they'll stand here for me to do that so I can explain what each condition is. Okay, my one with the 3, Of course, they're all afraid when I go to put a number on them, and then they run and the numbers are falling off, or the others take the number. Hi. Can we put your number back on again? Or you're not too pleased about that? Yeah, it's just a paper number, you guys. Anything different? I was kind of hoping they wouldn't notice. Okay, I have the numbers here on the ground because they're not going to let me put numbers on their back. So, we'll start at the beginning. So a number 1 score would be skeletal. And when a sheep is looking skeletal, I think that's very self-evident. You're going to look at it. You're going to see her backbone, her hip bones, her ribs if she's sheared off. Her stomach's going to be sunken in behind the hips. She's going to look skeletal, and I think anyone can tell that. Likewise, for a score of 5, at the other end of the scale, a 5 would be considered obese. So an obese sheep is going to be walking around, and when she walks, probably she's going to be jiggling. When you're looking at the backbone, see this sheep here. See how her back is kind of flat? In an obese sheep, the backbone will actually be an indented line down their back. Oftentimes a fat sheep will develop fat deposits at the base of the tail. Some breeds will do that more than others. But basically that's what you're looking at, the jiggling, the indented spine. You won't be able to visually see any bones, and if you were to feel them with your hands, it would be really difficult finding the bones. So those are the two ends of the spectrum that you really don't want to be on. 4 would be considered what I call chubby. Obviously, I told you I'm using layman's terms. Chubby you won't find on any chart. That's my description. And chubby is very, very subjective. I tend to like my sheep more on the chubby side. So chubby. These girls here are pregnant. So pregnant sheep, I don't want to see them fat, but I like to see them a 3, which would be normal, and a 4, which would be chubby. So anywhere between a 3 and a 4, I'm happy with. If you go into the 5 with a pregnant sheep, you can get into birthing problems because maybe that fat is building up on their internal organs as well. They're more sluggish. Same with a human. Like it just makes conceiving and delivering more difficult. I'm gonna look for a 4 sheep here, and a lot of people might say a lot of these sheep are 4s, like maybe even Peanut here. We're not looking at her belly because that could be a pregnant belly. What we're looking at is the top of her back, and there's no indent on her back, so she's not obese, and she's not jiggling, and I can see that her bone a little bit, but I'm saying if you want to call something a 4, she would be a 4, maybe. Like I say, it is subjective, so if you were to touch her, everyone's nervous now, so unfortunately I can't do the touchy-feely. But if you wanted to touch a 4, when you place your hand flat on her back, you could feel the bone with a little bit of pressure, but you have to put that pressure on her. And same with coming down around her ribs and stuff. Her bones shouldn't be prominent. Her ribs, you can feel that there's a little bit of layer of fat around her bones. For a 3 is ideal in most people's eyes, but what a 3 looks like will tend to look different in people's eyes. I think everyone in this group is a 3 to 4. But a 3, the difference between a 3 and a 4 is that, like, maybe this girl's more a 3. So she's a little more slender on top. You can see her hip bones a little bit when she walks, but they're not jutting out, but you can see that they're there. You can see that she has a backbone. I'm going to try to see someone else. This one here. You can see this one's backbone a little bit, the one in the middle. But you can also see that it's covered in flesh. So she might be more a 3. Right there. So I can see her bone structure visually. To touch it, like I said, you'd be able to feel all the bones, but it would still have a fine layer of fat over it, and underneath would be the meat. And because we don't like our sheep to be thin, we do like to maintain a 3 throughout the year as much as we can. I don't have a lot of examples of the lower numbers on the scale, but I do today for you. When you're going to see 2s on our farm is after sheep have been weaned, because especially with Suffolks, because those lambs are gaining a pound a day, which means they're drinking a lot of milk. So they're pulling off the fat from the mother, and it's very difficult to keep them in condition. So they will lose condition quite quickly. But the good thing about Suffolks is they know how to eat. Once they are weaned off, it doesn't usually take them long to get back to that body score of 3. And here are our show sheep. Hi, Quincy. Hi. Hi, you guys. Hilton and Quincy. So, since they came up here, I thought before I go show you the skinny ones, I'll show you the show sheep. So these guys just came from a show. And you will never see a skinny sheep at the show, because a skinny sheep doesn't look good. It looks like maybe it's got a health issue. The fat on a heavy sheep will fill in things on their body, like dips in their back and stuff like that. It can hide things. So sheep at shows or at cow shows or anything, they're going to be fed hard, so they're looking at their total best. They're not going to feed them to obesity, because most people don't like to look at obesity either in a sheep. But they are definitely going to be 4s. And Quincy and Hilton are definitely 4s. I can feel their bone under there. And to be honest, it's not a lot of fat at all. Fat coverage is also dependent on the breed you have. And Suffolks are a lean breed sheep. They don't carry a lot of fat, even when you do feed them hard. But if you're going to call anyone a 4, but this is Hilton. Hilton's starting to feel his bone. See how the bone rises up just a little bit there? I can feel it very easily. He might be a 3 now, because yeah, he's not getting his show feed since he's been here. And it's hot, so they're not eating as much. But you have to watch that when you're buying from a show, because oftentimes you'll bring a show sheep home and it will lose condition, and it won't look the same as it did when you bought it a few weeks earlier, because they are raised artificially. So, but that's why they look so fantastic, because they've been pampered for the show. And hopefully they stay looking fantastic, because we are going to feed them well. Hi, you must like this pen so much better. Yeah, you do. And you got a good breeze, because we got a storm coming in. But as you know, we had a worm issue. So I've got my pen of skinnies here. And normally I wouldn't like to bring you in to see a pen of skinnies because to me it's embarrassing. I don't like to see sheep in poor condition, especially when they're our own. And when they have wool on them, it's a bit of an excuse because these guys could be carrying three inches of wool, and unless you touched them and felt that bone, it's very difficult to distinguish unless they start looking poor, like their wool starts dropping off and stuff like that. But these guys, they got worms, and these guys are definitely a 2. And there's one in here that I would call a 1. So we can see that the hip bone is prominent. We can see the backbone is standing up. Hi, buddy. See how he's sunken in here too? I don't know if you can see that. He's sunken in. So when you feel him, it's visually you can see it, but if you feel him, you can get your hand almost right around the backbone, and you can easily, hi, you're feeling a little better, I see. And same with this guy. You can see the bones. To me, you shouldn't see that. And these guys are all eating now, so I do expect these guys will gain their weight back pretty quickly. You too. You're a big boy. But this guy here, the second one in, I would call him a 1. He's in really, really, really bad shape. He's eating, thank goodness. So I do expect he'll be all right. He's not off his feed. He's not down. But you can see how all the muscling on his leg has kind of atrophied compared to the one beside it. You can still see, even though this guy's thin too, he's still got obvious muscle fleshing on his behind, whereas this one here, you can see it's just totally sunken in. This one, you can see his hip bones and his spine, but they're not like jagged, sharp like this guy, much sharper. This is a 1. You never want your sheep to look like that. It's a sure sign of either A, worms, illness of some sort, or it's a sign of starving, whatever the cause is. So all these guys have been treated. We blame the oversight on having so many sheep and being so busy the last month, because before we started haying, these guys were all in great shape. And that's an example of how quickly a worm overload can bring your sheep down. This guy here, he's one of the pets. And as I'm talking, he's leaning right up against me. He hasn't left. You're a sweetheart. You are a sweetheart. I know. This is Joe. I've heard some people say that a sheep in perfect condition that you should score it along the rib cage, not along the backbone. And they said that it should be like the back of your hand, like when you pinch it up, the skin should just be covering. I kind of don't like that at all. To me, they should have some fat coverage just in case of times like this, in times of poor conditions or the feed's not the greatest. They've got a little bit of reserve on them. And to me, like, Joe here is, he's lost a lot of weight, but I still can feel that he's got coverage over his ribs. And some people would say, he's perfectly fine, no, don't worry. But because I see that, the bone right there, and I can see his hip bones there, I don't like that. So we're going to get Joe in much better condition than that. But it is personal preference. And a lot of people, they just don't want to feed him heavier. They say, what's the point? The ram's not having lambs. It's not doing anything. It's sitting here for a year. Likewise with a ewe that's not having babies, they'll say the same thing. You don't need to feed it. It's a matter of opinion. It's not my opinion. Yeah, as I mentioned before too, breed makes a difference. So Suffolks, I told you they're a more lean carcass animal. So even when they're heavy, they tend not to have very much fat. And Dorsets, on the other hand, will go to fat very easily. That's why we like to keep the two groups separate if we can, because Suffolks actually need to be fed harder. They've got a much bigger body and frame, and therefore if you're a bigger person, you eat more. If you're a little bit smaller, our Dorsets are maybe 50 pounds on average smaller than our Suffolks, they're gonna eat a little bit less. And you have to watch Dorsets more carefully if you're feeding grain, like corn and stuff, because they will tend to put on fat. Pair breeds of sheep. I used to have Dorper sheep, and I used to show them too. And I was a real novice. And all I fed my Dorpers was hay, and I fed them grain while they had lambs. But I didn't give them grain or anything for the show. I thought they were always in good condition, and they were out on pasture. But when I went to the show, people said, don't feed them any more grain because you're going to get them too fat. Because Dorpers, what will happen to them if they're well fed, they will develop a fat deposit on the end of their tail, like up at the tail head. And it will be a jiggly, funny looking thing. There's a reason Dorpers produce those fat tail heads, and it's because they're from, well, they were developed in a climate where in the summertime they had very little feed in the deserty areas, so they would feed off scrub and stuff like that. But when they were in lush conditions, they would actually store their energy in those tail heads, so that when they got into the lean conditions, they had a food source that they could take off and do really well. And that's why Dorpers do really well in drought conditions and fields that don't have too much grass. They have a lot of weeds and thistles and stuff. They will behave a lot like a goat and do a lot of browsing. Anyway, clear as mud. I think it's pretty basic. You don't want to be fat. You don't want to be skeletal. It's like with anything, human or animal. You don't want extremes on either end. They say that it's recommended that most sheep farms run their sheep between a 2 and a 4. And right in between 2 and a 4 is a 3. Right smack dab in the middle. And if they get a little heavier during pregnancy, that's probably a good thing too, because they're going to be feeding lambs, and you want them to have a lot of reserves so that they don't get into this condition. Hey, Joe? Oh, Joe, we're sorry. We're sorry, but we're going to give you a lot of food slowly, because when they get in poor condition, like I said, you want to gradually increase it. You don't want them to gorge out. You don't want them to eat bad feed because they're so hungry. So we just offer it to them. It's the same food everyone else is getting, but we might increase the grain little by little so that they get it back up. And just make sure they always have feed in front of them. Just one more thing while Joe's here, being all googly for me. See how pink his eye is? That's a really good sign. He's not anemic. Thought I'd come in with Quincy and Hilton, see if they'd come over. But Suffolks are sheep that tend to like to leave their head in a trough. You will never get a score of a 2 looking like these guys look. Their muscling is very evident, and you can't see any hip bones or ribs or backbones on these guys. This is what a show sheep looks like. It's hard to maintain sheep on a working farm in this kind of condition. They are working sheep, and because you're feeding numbers, you're going to have a little range of conditions. But ideally you want to be selecting for these easy keepers that look like this without putting all the feed into it. Every time I look at these boys, I'm very happy with them. Such a nice boy, Hilton. You don't like that doggy. And here's Chewy in the breeding group. Hi, Chewy. What kind of condition are you in? Hi, Gimli. Chewy should be she's in a breeding group. Hi, Gimli. You look very nice. You do. He's in a breeding group. And you see, it's hard for me to say, can you see? But I can feel his bone there. And see his tail wags because he likes that itch. Yeah. Does it feel good, Gimme? I would score him like 3, 3.5. I can feel his bone easily. I don't feel any fat. Like, these guys, to be honest, feel in really good condition. Like, fat should feel a little more squishy. I mean, most of us know what fat feels like, unfortunately. And I'm not feeling it on these guys. I see that they've got coverage over their bones, but it doesn't feel squishy. It feels pretty solid, like it's skin with just a slight bit of fat and mainly muscling. And that's what we want. Hi, girls. Try again. So these two show sheep, we could judge them as a 3 or a 4 or somewhere in between. Stay still. Don't move. There we go. There. Body scoring sheep. These two, depending on your opinion, would be between a 3 and a 4. I'm going to say they're a 3.5. And I've never had cows, but from what I read about the cow scoring, their chart is exactly the same. It goes from 1 to 5, and they're looking for the exact same things. The only difference I could see was that they also can judge their condition by the tail head, how much it raises up and how much of an indent it has. So they don't really look at that with sheep, but a cow's tail does stand up in the air more, so I guess it's easier for them to judge tail head as well. Oh, the skies are starting to turn black. We're supposed to be getting a thunderstorm, so hopefully we do, and hopefully we get a lot of rain with it. And hopefully also I explained how to body score your sheep somewhat. When I edit it, I'll see how bad it turns out. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll join us again tomorrow for the next day at Ewetopia Farms. Bye for now.